Mayor, I'm trying to get Steve Hall a link to the meeting, so I'll just need a second in order to be able to do that.
Okay.
I sent him the wrong one.
Okay.
I think if you want to start though, Mayor, we can go ahead and do the pledge and everything, and that will give him time to join.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. It is 7 p.m. and so I will call to order this regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission this March 8th, 2021. And we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Okay. Chris, would you like to take the roll call?
I would. And just a reminder, we need to give our city, county, and state. Commissioner Tolis.
City of Mount Pleasant, County of Isabella, State of Michigan.
Commissioner Ronan.
George, you are muted.
We'll come back. Commissioner Gillis.
Yes, Mount Pleasant, Isabella, Michigan.
Okay. Commissioner Simon.
City of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, Michigan.
Thank you. Commissioner Alsager.
City of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, State of Michigan.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
City of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, State of Michigan.
Thank you. Commissioner Ronan.
City of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, State of Michigan.
Thank you. And Mayor Joseph.
City of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, and the State of Michigan.
Everybody is present and accounted for.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Today we have two presentations. The first, our first guest is Steve Hall from the Central Michigan District Health Department. And, we thought we'd invite Steve since it's been about a year since we started our lockdowns here locally in the state of Michigan. And so Steve's here to kind of give an update on progress over the past year and probably outlook on the vaccine and just everything COVID related. So thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So hopefully technology works, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and I've got a short PowerPoint for you. All right, do you guys see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start off by, my name is Steve Hall. I'm the health officer with Central Michigan District Health Department. Hopefully you're all aware, you might not be, but we are what's called a district health department. So we actually cover 6 counties. So Aranac, Clare, Gladwin, Isabella, Osceola, and Roscommon counties. Hopefully I got all 6. So I thought I'd start out with a kind of a look at the current case counts and where we're at right now. Obviously I'll focus on Isabella County with the commission here. So right now, as of today, we are at 3,605 cases in Isabella County. We have seen 72 deaths. And one of the key metrics that I always look at in terms of how we're doing is what's called, it's a rolling 7-day average of new cases per million population. And right now you'll see at Isabella County, we are at 65.43. So that's a positive number. It had been much higher than that in the past. It's bumped up just a little bit from where it was last week. But again, if you look at it in comparison to the rest of our counties, we're still doing very well there. And then the test positivity rate is another indicator that we look at. And you'll notice right now, this is the lowest I've seen it all year. I mean, through this whole year of this pandemic, now we're at 1.5%. So again, that's positive. So knock on wood, we're seeing things moving in the right direction. I'll give you a little bit of background and history and kind of where case numbers have been. District-wide, so for all 6 counties, the pandemic starting last March, our initial, the highest month that we had was August, which was when all the CMU students went back to campus. And back then that was 386. And I remember we all felt overwhelmed and swamped with all the number of cases. And obviously with those, some of the issues with the students coming back to CMU. So out of that 386 cases in our district, 286 of those were from Isabella County. And again, we thought that was bad. Well, we didn't know what bad was until we hit the fall. October, district-wide, we had 923 cases, and then November was the one that just really hammered us. We had 3,236 cases in the month of November. You'll recall the state kind of re-implemented some of the restrictions in November to try to curb that, and as I kind of go through these numbers, you'll see that that process did work, at least in slowing the spread of cases, because we went from 3,236 in November. December was 2,116. January was 1,025. And then February, district-wide, we were down to 354 cases. So again, we've seen that start to improve. Obviously, vaccine is a big component moving forward. So I thought I'd give you just a little idea on the whole process with the vaccines. And you've probably heard this in the news. Anyone that knows me or has followed any of our material, whether it be on Facebook, our opt-in emails, our website, we've news stories that I've been a part of. Initially we were saying demand far outweighed supply. The first shipment of vaccines that we got 1,800 vaccines, and that was for all 6 counties. Then you'll notice January 5th, we only got 200 doses, and then 975. So the vaccine, in terms of rolling in to be able to get out, was a pretty slow process. You'll notice January 18th, 1,200 doses total for the entire district. If you look up at the top, you'll see Aranet County. You see there, a couple of weeks, we got 100 doses for the entire county. So obviously that vaccine doesn't go very far when you're receiving 100 doses. So that was really an issue, when we started. The vaccine supply has started to tick up, which is a good thing. In fact, now we're receiving both Moderna vaccine and Pfizer basically on a weekly basis right now. So we're to the point now we're probably getting 3,200 to 3,400 vaccines, first dose vaccines a week, which is certainly helpful as we continue to try to vaccinate everyone that wants it. So as of March 5th, which last Friday, a total of 22,376 doses in our jurisdiction. 14,121 of those were first dose vaccines. To give you an idea of the initial demand, we had put a survey on our website, and in essence, it served as a waiting list. We had just roughly 10,000 people that were over the age of 75 that had signed up, and 15,892 that were in the 65 to 74 category. So again, if you think about that, that's 25,000 people right there. And when you're getting 1,200 doses a week, it's going to take a while. So kind of breaking news, as of late Friday, we actually changed the process of how we're doing things. We've done away with the waiting lists. Everyone that was on a waiting list had been contacted. And now we actually have if you meet one of the current priority groups, you can actually self-schedule your appointment right from our website. And, it had got to the point which in all honesty is a good thing. And this isn't just a Central Michigan district issue. It was pretty much statewide, and especially in Northern Michigan. You know, there's been enough vaccine and enough different people are doing it now where, you know, people can get it at Rite Aid, they can get it at Meijer. There were some people that were getting vaccinated at Walgreens, their hospital systems. We were getting to a point that if we were trying to fill, say, a 400 shot clinic, we'd have to go 800 people deep on our waiting list just to get enough people to fill that clinic, because so many people had got it elsewhere. And so we decided to contact everyone that we had on our waiting list, give them an opportunity to schedule an appointment. And then like I say, we opened this up on Friday in terms of anyone meeting the current criteria can just schedule it right via the website. The other new news is that the priority groups have changed, and right now we will vaccinate anyone over the age of 50. So that's new. And unlike, you know, the state just released information that as of today, anyone over the age of 50 with underlying conditions is eligible. We're not even dealing with that. We're just saying if you're over the age of 50, you can get vaccinated now. And we also opened up some more of the critical and essential workers in phase 1B group C. So public transit employees, grocery store workers, post office workers, things like that are now people like that are eligible to get vaccine. So we're hoping that, you know, that will keep this process moving, keep the clinics full. And like I say, right now, the whole goal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible that want it. Give you an idea on vaccine numbers by county, looking at Isabella, and again, this is only Central Michigan District Health Department, but we've done 7,381 vaccines in Isabella County. If you look at the coverage, and this is for everyone who's giving vaccines in Isabella County, 17% of the population over the age of 16 in Isabella County has been vaccinated. I can tell you that the age group of 65 to 74, 53% of our population has been vaccinated, and the over 75 population is now at 60.7% have been vaccinated. As we've kind of said, this is going to take time, and obviously as vaccine becomes more available, this timeline should change, but this is the state's estimated timeline in terms of vaccination. And you'll see the 65 and older and frontline essential workers, they show it, you know, going into June, basically, before you'd hit the entire population there. The 16 to 64 years with health conditions, they're talking about that starting in May. I have a feeling that may change. I think the state may open it up to those 16 to 64 with underlying conditions a little bit earlier. I just don't know when, but I could see that happening fairly soon as we continue to, like I say, just fill in these clinics and trying to get the people most at risk vaccinated. Wanted to talk a little bit about our partnerships. One of the biggest things that we have is our emergency managers, and we work very closely with them because it's really important for us to vaccinate as many people as possible, is to have offsite clinics. You can only do so much in your office. And in Isabella County, we have a great relationship. Isabella County is actually a very special place. I can say that. You know, I've been here a little over 7 years. We've been through some tough times, the flooding and things like that. And this particular community comes together very well, and we all work well together. I was in the Emergency Operations Center for a couple of weeks during the flood, and you know, whether it's the city, whether it's the county, whether it's the tribe, everyone pulls together when needed. And this is another example. In Isabella County, we did a clinic out at the airport. I want to say that was in January. And again, so many people came together to make that successful, but we did about 500 vaccines in that one day in a drive-through format out at the airport. And then we've also been holding clinics at the Soaring Eagle Casino a couple of times a week. And then recently we started a clinic at CMU at the Finch Fieldhouse. That initially started as 1 day a week. Now we're moving that to 2 days a week as well. So 4 days a week in Isabella County, we're having large clinics. And then the other day we're, have a smaller clinic in our office. So a lot of vaccines happening in Isabella County every day. Thought I'd give you just a little look at what those clinics look like. So this is the airport clinic, and you can see some of the tents there. And we had 5 lanes of traffic, so 5 cars at a time could be going through. There's a picture in those blue tents. That's where the nurses were, and so they would just walk up, and the people would roll down their window, and they'd get a shot while being in their car. This is from one of the clinics at the casino, and the person to my right there on the left-hand side of your screen is actually Congressman Molinar did come to one of the clinics and walk through to see the process of what we were doing in that clinic. This is our Clare County staff, and again, this is happening in all of our counties in terms of off-site clinics. In Clare County, we've been doing a lot at Hayes Township Hall, and that's just a picture of our staff. This is a really good shot, an overhead shot of our clinic at Finch Field House. Again, a lot of organization went into that and the flow, and it just works really well. And again, we appreciate our partnership with everyone involved, and it's just been great to see the community come together to get this done. So that is kind of the basics of my presentation, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. That was a very great presentation, and appreciate your efforts over the past year. It's been a memorable year for probably not the best reasons, and we've appreciated the steady hand that I think your office has guided us through. So with that, I see Commissioner Elsager has her hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to give a good recommendation for the health department and their efforts at Soaring Eagle Casino. The group there was just very professional, and they worked you right through and then kept you for the 15 minutes afterwards to make sure you didn't have a bad reaction. I just was very impressed with the whole procedure. So thank you.
Thanks for that comment.
Pete, do you have your hand up?
Yes, Mr. Hall, I got a quick question for you. On that first slide where you had Isabella County at 3,200 and some, what time frame did that represent on that first slide?
That's a total number throughout the pandemic. So that's the case count as of today.
Okay, thank you. And also, is Isabella Citizens for Health affiliated with the health department on this COVID? I know I went and got mine on a Friday, and they had some kind of group thing where they were doing a lot of people on Saturday. Was that out there?
Yeah, what I would tell you is obviously that's a healthcare provider. I actually serve on Isabella County or Isabella Systems for Health Board. But what we were able to do, and this is a key component that I didn't mention, as more vaccines come in, and obviously the goal is to get everyone vaccinated as quick as possible. So if we look at the amount of vaccine that we have and go, you know what, I don't think we can use all that vaccine this week, but some of our partners can. We can actually do what's called a redistribution of vaccine. And so we did give Isabella Systems for Health some vaccine to help with the vaccination process, primarily with the 65 and over population. But then I lowered it. I talked to Jennifer and said, hey, anybody over the age of 50? And same thing with CMU. So CMU is actually, we gave them some vaccine last week. And so they're holding some of their own clinics at Finch Field House as well, just in an effort to help us to get as many people as possible, as quickly as possible.
Because I know I talked to a couple seniors there that said that the health department had sent them over there, to get their shots. So thank you.
Well, what we did initially was we gave them a list. So as we gave them the vaccine, we said, hey, here's some people that are on our waiting list. If you could do these, we'd we'd appreciate it. And then, like I say, and then we pretty much just opened it up and said, let's start vaccinating as many people as we can over the age of 50 and get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I just want to thank you too, Mr. Hall. I was one of those people that went through the airport, and that was such a smooth operation, efficient. Your team was so nice and cordial, and they couldn't get my work. I have my last name. It took longer, but it was they took their time and let us wait after the 15 minutes after the vaccine. And I also want to make sure I give a shout out to the team and also all the volunteers, because I know I had a young lady call me to schedule my father's vaccine and said that she was working at volunteering her time. So many of our community members are doing this out of public service without even being paid, and commendable our community members that have pulled together and how you have also helped that team pull that off. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for mentioning the volunteers. We couldn't do it without them, and we've had great volunteers. Like I said, the whole community stepped up. I'll give you one really quick story, but I had an employee that recently retired, and 2 days after she retired, I walked into the CMU clinic at Finch Fieldhouse, and there she was volunteering already. So community has been great. And I should say too, and I forgot to mention this, I know Nancy's heard this, but last week actually FEMA came to Mount Pleasant, and so their logistics team, and they only looked at, from what I understand, they looked at 3 different areas in the state to take a look at clinics. They were in Holland, then they went to DeVos Place in Grand Rapids to see a really big clinic, but then they came to Mount Pleasant. So they actually walked through both Finch Fieldhouse at a clinic for CMU, and then we took them over to the casino, and they got to go through that and see how we were doing things here in Mount Pleasant. So.
Any other questions for Mr. Hall? Okay. Well, thank you again for your time and your hard work and dedication, especially over the past year. And we have certainly been a big supporter of you and our just the, not only the local but the statewide effort to curb infection rates and to get us through this pandemic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have a presentation for our overlining the process for redistricting in Michigan by Julianne, and I hope I say this right, Julianne Pastula of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission.
Thank you so much, Mayor Joseph. Yes, that's correct. And I will also share my screen. I have a very brief PowerPoint that I'd like to walk to. Then I can be available for questions as well. Perfect. Good evening. As the mayor indicated, my name is Julianne Pastula. I serve as general counsel to the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, also known as the MICRC. I reside in Wayne County, Michigan. I would like to recognize and thank Mayor Joseph and the members of the City Commission for this opportunity to present information regarding the MICRC and its work. I would also like to thank Ms. Pritchard and Mr. Saladin for coordinating my participation in this meeting. In 2018, Michigan voters adopted a ballot initiative shifting the responsibility for redistricting from the legislature to the MICRC, who now has responsibility for nonpartisan redistricting. The commission is comprised of 13 randomly selected Michiganders from over 9,000 applications, and the political makeup is 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and we have 5 independents. The MICRC is responsible for redistricting the congressional and state legislative districts. To ensure fair, free, and impartial maps, the MICRC is required to solicit public input before drawing any redistricting plans for the state of Michigan. through a minimum of 10 public hearings throughout the state. We've been discussing and presenting to the commission. I believe we'll have more than 15 public hearings throughout the state during the first cycle, and there will be at least 5 throughout the state during our second cycle of public hearings. Per the Michigan Constitution, the purpose for the public hearings are threefold. First, to inform the public about the redistricting process. Historically, it's been done in private, not open to the public. Secondly, to share the purpose and responsibilities of the commission. And third, to solicit information from the public about potential redistricting plans. Lastly, the MICRC and staff welcomes your ideas to increase awareness and engagement in Michigan's inaugural citizens redistricting process. Please email us at redistricting@michigan.gov, by mail to MICRC, P.O. Box 30318, Lansing 48909, or you can share your ideas at our weekly meetings, which are every Thursday during our public comment session, or join us at one of our upcoming public hearings. The public hearings should be discussed this Thursday, March 11th at our meeting from 1 to 4. And when the schedule is adopted, it will be posted on our website, www.michigan.gov/MICRC. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak to the residents of the city of Mount Pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Are there any questions? Commissioner Alsager.
Hello there, and thank you for being with us tonight. My question is about the effect of the census and how that is impeding your work.
Thank you, Commissioner Alsager. So that just this last Friday, the commission has authorized filing with the Michigan Supreme Court in tandem with the Secretary of State's office to request relief from the current deadline date, which is November 1st. The reason that the November 1st deadline that's contained in the Michigan Constitution is untenable is it requires a 45-day public notice period, which brings us to September 17th. And at this time, we do not expect the census data till at least September 30th. So we are hopeful that the request to the Michigan Supreme Court will move forward positively, but the commission felt very strongly about taking proactive action to try and remedy this.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Pastula? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. And obviously we all know it's a work in progress, and it's the first of its kind here in our state. And so it's obviously, there's ongoing hiccups, obviously, with last year with the census being kind of delayed. And so we thank you for, coming and giving this presentation. And we look forward to hopefully having our districts redrawn by an independent, commission that will hopefully deliver more fair and elections.
Thank you for your time and for your hospitality. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Do we have any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing none, at this time I will open up public input on agenda items. And if you're joining us here by Zoom, there is the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining us by phone, you can hit *9 and I can recognize you for comment. And just ask that you state your name and your address. Manager Ridley, did we have any emailed comments on agenda items this evening?
No, we do not have any thus far, Mayor.
Okay. All right. I don't see any hands up in the attendees section. And so at this time, I will close the public input on agenda items for the evening. And there is a second chance for the public to give public comment at the end of our meeting, as well as at the public hearing for the ordinance to amend the regarding cross connections. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Manager Ridley for our receipt of petitions and communications.
Thank you, Mayor. In this section of the agenda tonight, you have the ongoing report on pending items, and you also have the monthly report on complaints received. You have the January minutes of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and you have notice of a temporary traffic control order on Bennett Street that would remove some no parking signs. And as you know, with these, they're in place on a trial period for 90 days before they come to you for final approval. But we use this opportunity to give you the heads up on them in case you want to pay attention to that area at all. The next item on the receipt of petitions and communications is receipt of the 2020 annual report. And I recognize that your agenda packet was very large this time, so you may not have had a chance to read through that as thoroughly, but I hope that when you get a little bit of time, you'll have an opportunity to read that report, because in spite of the inordinate things that you all and the staff all had to deal with during 2020, as we put that together, I was still pleased to see the significant amount of progress that was made by the staff with your support and with your approval of a number of things to continue to move Mount Pleasant forward. So I hope you'll have a chance to read through that. And if you have a desire for a printed copy of that, we have it at the printers right now, and just let us know and we can deliver a printed copy for you if you desire. The next item is a correspondence that was received from Mr. Glenn Irwin regarding the request that you had made kind of at one of your prior meetings about looking for some input from some local property owners. So Mr. Irwin took the time to provide some written communication to you in that regard. And then the last item on the petition item is what I had talked to you a couple weeks ago, that we received 3 communications from downtown property owners about their concern with snow removal. And I mentioned to you at that time that I wanted to have an opportunity to try to make contact with those 3 individuals. And we, over the last 2 weeks, we had success talking with one of the individuals, but we tried to contact the other 2 and did not make contact with them. But as I surmised, much of the concern was with the 2 recent snowfalls that had happened. And I indicated to you a couple of weeks ago that I thought that it had to do with the timing, because the snow started after midnight, didn't end until 5 or 6 in the morning. And unfortunately, when that happens, there's just not enough time to clean out downtown, because we have to use lots of equipment, and then we have to haul the snow out of the downtown. And it can take 6 or 7 hours to do that. So if the snow doesn't stop until 5 or 6 in the morning, there's just no way to safely do that before all of the people start using downtown. But there were concerns from those individuals about maybe it wasn't just related to those 2 instances. So I guess I just wanted to remind the commission that we really haven't changed our guidelines of how we do snow removal in probably the last 10 or 12 years. We're still following those same kind of guidelines. And everybody refers to it as the 4-inch rule, but it's really not that simple. As you know, we've talked about it a number of times. Snow removal is an art, it's not a science. And it's so dependent on when the snow occurs, what kind of snow, what the predictions are. And so there's a lot of judgment that goes into when snow removal should occur and when we have people come in on overtime. But I guess the couple things I wanted to assure you of: downtown is not our last priority. Downtown gets done depending on when the snow falls so that we can schedule it appropriately and safely. And secondly, one of the individuals I did talk to suggested that maybe what we needed to do is do 2 passes of the downtown to get the majority of it out before it stops snowing and before people start coming downtown, and then come back a second time and clean out the rest of it the following night. That's certainly an option to do. We have generally tried not to do that because it basically doubles the amount of effort and therefore doubles the cost. But that's certainly an option that could be considered in those rare instances where the snow does occur at the odd hours like that. So that's kind of an overview of what that one conversation resulted in. And so that's the end of the petitions and communications for this evening.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. And I will say snow removal has been one of those topics that I think it is an art, and it is something that is much more complex than it meets the than it is on its face at times. And so speaking for myself, I think Mr. Weaver and the street department have done a good job, and so I do look forward to feedback from our community members. Commissioner Gillis, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to make a correction to the Parks and Recreation agenda. It has 2020 as a year. I think it should be 2021 for January 26th.
Oh, we will make sure that gets corrected. Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Toles.
Yeah, one quick comment, please. On the snow removal, I can agree with Manager Ridley. It gets quite expensive to try to do it in two parts. But I think that when we have late events like that, it'll almost be crucial to get maybe one truck to come out with one operator and just windrow all sides of the parking into the center of the road and leave the pile there, and then get the pile out during the night. That way the pedestrians that are parking in the parking spaces on each side, that snow is cleared to the center and windrowed up, and will only take probably a couple hours. I think that's something that can be looked at.
Yeah, that's a good point, Commissioner Toles. It's interesting though, because on that very last snowfall, we did go through partway through the day and did some of that windrow. And then we got complaints from people that they found that to be more, they felt that was more dangerous because they would get caught in the windrow sometimes because of, so it's just, you know, I hear what you're saying. It's just, we found we can't please everybody, but it's something we will certainly continue to look at on those late snowfalls.
All right, well, thank you again, Manager Ridley. We are now at our consent calendar for the evening, and are there any items that need to be removed from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, Manager Ridley, would you go through our consent calendar tonight?
Yes, we're recommending the following items: approval of the minutes of your regular meeting of February 22nd. And then we just have two of the bids that are on the consent calendar tonight. One of them is for pavement markings, and this is an annual process we do for pavement markings throughout the city. And we do a certain portion of the city every year on a rotating basis. And so we've provided a map for you of which areas will receive pavement markings this year. And we're recommending award of the bid to M&M Pavement Marking for $24,878. And that project is funded by the Act 51 monies that we receive for maintaining major and local streets. The second bid for you is for engineering services for Brown Street. That section of Brown Street from North Drive to High Street is scheduled for reconstruction in 2022, and it's partially funded by a $375,000 MDOT grant. And typically with MDOT grants, the specifications are much different than what we typically do, and there's more inspection that needs to be done. So we typically use an outside engineering firm for those type of projects. So based on the quality-based selection process, we're recommending award of the bid to Prine and Newhoff for $96,546. And that covers not only the design engineering, but also the construction engineering that will occur in 2022. And we're recommending a budget amendment for this year that would only cover the design services. And that budget amendment amount is $31,358. And again, would be funded by those Act 51 funds. The next item we're recommending is a contract with McLaren Central Michigan to continue our wellness services through the local hospital for that are offered through our employee health program. McLaren has once again agreed to hold the price at the same level that it's been at, and they've agreed to hold that price for the next 2 years. And we have over 80 of our employees, of our benefited employees, who take place in our wellness program. And because we're a small employer, we can't do the analysis to prove to you the linkage between investment and savings in healthcare. But there's numerous studies that show that linkage. So we feel this is a great investment in controlling our healthcare costs. So we're recommending authorization of the agreement for the mayor to sign for 2 years with McLaren Central Michigan for $20,470 per year. And there's adequate funds budgeted in our health insurance account to cover that. And then the next item, which was the biggest part of your packet, was the opportunity for you to receive the 2% requests that are due to the tribal council by the end of this month. And we typically give them to you early in the month so that you have adequate time to read through those, because as you know, at your next meeting, we'll ask you for your top 5 priorities to communicate to the tribal council. And then lastly, we have approval of payrolls and warrants.
Commissioner Gillis.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay. And Commissioner Elsager.
I will second that.
All right. Any discussion on the consent calendar? I just wanted to note a couple things. One, the Brown Street Reconstruction Engineering Services. I was obviously, trust staff in their review of all the bidders, but I was especially, I think, just a little bit reassured because it's the same designer for the other part of Brown Street that was done, and so I thought that consistency was nice to see, and also very supportive of the McLaren Health contract. I think that's a service that a lot of our employees use, and I think is a testament to our commitment to our employees, making sure that they're healthy and have services available to them. Seeing no other hands up for discussion, I would ask that we go into a roll call vote to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
That passes 7-0.
Okay. All right. Next on our agenda is our public hearing for the evening. This is on an ordinance to amend section 52.12 and 52.29 of City Code regarding cross connections and to consider approval of the same. Nancy, I guess, would you like to give an overview?
Yeah, just a short one, Mayor. Thank you. This would provide the update to our ordinances to implement the state required residential cross connection inspection program. As I think I mentioned 2 weeks ago, we've been doing inspections of commercial and industrial properties for a long period of time. And the state has now extended that requirement to residential units now. And so we have 5 years to get all of our residential places inspected. So we plan to do 20% per year. And then the follow-up inspections are approximately every 10 to 15 years after that. And these are done in order to protect the municipal water supply. I guess I should mention at the when you set the public hearing, there was a question about the potential cost to residential customers. And I covered it in one of your future agenda items, but I just thought I should mention it here before your public hearing, that what will be inspected is the exterior of the house. So what they'll really be looking for is primarily irrigation systems and something called hose bibs, which I don't know what hose bibs are, but there's people on the call who can explain that to you if you have questions on it. And so any cost to the homeowner is likely to be related to their irrigation system, because the contract we're proposing will actually provide a couple hose bibs if needed at each location. And so really any costs are likely related to the irrigation system. So it's probably not appropriate for use of our CDBG grant funds to assist with those kinds of repairs. But certainly the individuals who have done those inspections are on the call and can either answer those questions after your public hearing or as part of the bid process, if that would be helpful for you. But after holding the public hearing, we recommend you approve the ordinance as drafted.
Okay. At this time, I will open up the public hearing on this ordinance change. And if you are here with us by Zoom, you should be able to see the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I can recognize you for public comment. If you are here with us by phone, I believe you can hit *9 on your telephone, and that will do the same. And I just ask that you state your name and your address for the record. Okay, I don't see any hands being raised for the public hearing, and so I will now close the public hearing. I would first, I guess, like to hear from maybe Director Moore or someone who has direct experience with these inspections, and just maybe give the commission an overview of what these inspections look like and the maybe typical issues that they come across, as well as maybe explain the hose bibs a little more clearly.
So I've promoted to panelists both Jason DeFider and Jason Moore, and I think they can address your questions. And if not, we also have a representative from the bidder that is here if they want to turn it over to him as well. Jason DeFider, do you want to start off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. The hose bibs that you were talking about are simply the outdoor hose fixtures. They're called hose bibs, and that's what you would attach your hose to for gardening or flowers or whatnot. The vacuum breaker is what would be supplied by HydroCorp, and that screws onto the hose bib and protects the municipality and the homeowner from any kind of cross connection, any kind of backflow that would be picked up from that hose. So my belief is the inspection, as far as I understand it, and if Paul Patterson is on, yeah, there he is. He can explain what his guys would do better than me, probably. My understanding, it's been explained to me that it's going to be an exterior only. My personnel will be doing inspections during routine services, like when we're rotating a meter or addressing a complaint. When we're going through the building, we would be looking at things like, potential, like a cross connection in a residential home would look something like if you had a slop sink and you had a hose attached to your sink, your faucet, and it was draped into the sink where the hose could be submerged in water. That would be a potential, but that fix would simply be shortening the hose, making sure there's an air gap between the hose and the top of the sink. But those would happen with routine inspections, and I don't really see a lot of potential costs to the homeowner unless they've done something really strange, like hook their water line into a sewer or something, with a valve. That would be the only thing that would be bad, obviously. So, and that would require some kind of fix or remediation on the homeowner's part. But I mean, we don't anticipate stuff like that. So Paul can explain what his personnel will do on the exterior visits if he can.
Yeah, thank you. So the inspections that we'll be doing, they're not intrusive whatsoever. We will simply be inspecting the exterior of the property. And again, we'll look for lawn irrigation systems, unprotected hose connections, possibly pools, spas, any kind of water uses on the outside of the home. We don't require the homeowner to be present because we are not entering the home. But we will send a letter, and they have the opportunity to, request that we come at a specific time so they can be there. We don't have a problem with that. And in many cases, that's good because we can explain things to them while we're doing the inspection. In either case, we will leave. If no one's there, we use door knockers, and we'll hang those on the door so the homeowner will know that we were there. That will tell them whether or not they're in compliance or not in compliance. If they are not in compliance, then we will follow that up with a postal notice explaining what they need to do. And then we'll provide any follow-up. There's 800 numbers they can call if they have questions. We point them to our website a lot because we've got frequently asked questions and a lot of video content and just general information to assist with, getting everybody into compliance, which at the end of the day, that's the goal.
Okay. How often would these inspections be for, I know that there's like a 5-year plan, but after that initial inspection, would it be yearly or every 3 to 5 years, something like that?
Most likely, it will be 10 years, once every 10 years. I believe that's what the city wrote into their cross connection plan, and that's the maximum allowed by Eagle at this time.
Okay. Are there any direct questions for our guests tonight? And then if there are, then after I guess those sort of more informational questions, then I think we can get into direct, make a motion and get into a direct conversation about the ordinance. I do see Commissioner Alsager has her hand up.
Yes, please. I think this is a good opportunity for me to ask a question that I have no idea what the answer is, but we have one of the older houses in town that when we bought it, it had 2 different water outlets in the backyard that typically don't have a hose attached or anything, but they were pretty handy for watering. Is that something that would be needing inspection?
Yeah, as long as if they are connected to the public water, which I'm sure they are, then we would need to take a look at those.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I have similar, I'm just wondering, so if you had an irrigation system or hoses, I mean, is there something you need to do then at that point? I mean, I'm not quite tracking so let's pretend you had an in-ground watering system. What would have to happen? I guess I apologize. I don't know how to phrase it any differently, to be honest.
No, that's fine. So with underground irrigation, essentially we're looking for compliance with what's required in the Michigan plumbing and residential codes. So with a underground irrigation system, it is required by code that there is a specific type of vacuum breaker installed to protect the water supply from any pesticides, fertilizers, animal waste, anything else that could be on the lawn. So that's what we're looking for, is just to make sure that vacuum breaker or backflow preventer is installed, that it's installed properly. In most cases, that is going to be what's called a pressure vacuum breaker. And one thing I should mention, those are testable, and it is also a requirement that those are tested every so often by a certified tester. So that would be another part of the program. Once we create an inventory, we would follow up with homeowners that needed to complete that required testing.
Commissioner Toles?
I got a question for Paul there. So in other words, every outside faucet connection you have on any residence is going to have a vacuum breaker or a backflow prevention valve installed?
They all are required to have one. I won't commit to that. We'll have to provide one to everybody. It depends on when the home was built. There were code changes that happened, so in many cases they're already installed as part of the fixture, so they're integral to the hose connection. In a lot of cases, maybe there was a change of occupancy or a permit was pulled and maybe the plumbing inspector was there, so he had them install them. So it's kind of hit or miss. We'll find older homes will most likely all need them. Again, depending on year of construction, they may or may not.
And what kind of cost factor were we talking about updating these older homes?
Well, for the ones on the hose connections, as part of the proposal that we provided, we will actually provide those when we're on site. So just for the hoses, there should be no cost. If for some reason, someone got a notice, which we've had, and they go out and buy them, those things are, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, $10 a piece, roughly.
Okay, and the backflow prevention valve?
On the lawn irrigation system?
Yes.
I have to say I'm hesitant to quote any prices because that would be something that they would need a contractor to come install. And with contractor prices being different in just about every county in the state, it's hard to nail that down. I can tell you can buy one at Home Depot, or no, I'm sorry, Menards was the cheapest I saw them, was I think in the $60 range.
Yeah, the valve's not the problem. It's the installation of the valve.
Right.
The valve is not essential. It's the labor to put it in. And also we're talking about having an inspection on that every 10 years. So you'd have to go to each house and inspect this.
Yes.
Okay. It looks, Commissioner Gillis.
Is that inspection every 10 years required by Eagle?
Yes, it is. Well, so the Safe Drinking Water Act, Public Act 399, states that all connections to the water system, commercial, residential, must be inspected in accordance with the local cross connection control plan. So essentially the utility, City of Mount Pleasant, wrote a plan and we submitted it to Eagle and they accepted that plan. So now it also says in the rule that you have to implement that plan. As far as the frequency of inspection goes, the Public Act refers to the Eagle Cross Connection Control Guidance Manual, and that's where you're going to find it says 10 years is the maximum you can go between inspections. Actually, the language says all connections will be inspected, high hazards every year, low hazard every 2 to 4 years, maximum every 5 to 10. So when the plan was put together and submitted, residential was written in as 10 years so that we could go out the maximum that they allow at this time.
And so in your experience, has this been a huge problem, so much so that they would enact this kind of regulation and cost to homeowners?
It can be. The hard part with what we do is a lot of times things happen and it's not reported, so we don't know about. But when they do get reported, they're generally big issues. I can point out, years ago, there was an issue in the city of Southfield where some parasitic worms got in the water supply, and that was from a lawn irrigation system. Going out of state, I've seen in the last few years, there's an issue in I think it was Iowa. 80 residents got sick over Memorial Day weekend due to a lawn irrigation system and a backflow event that contaminated water got into their community water supply. So the frequency, probably not, very frequent, but when it does happen, it's usually something bad. So
it is quite rare, but when it does happen, it impacts enough where you have to do a boil water advisory or such.
absolutely. And again, that's, if you're lucky enough that boiled water will actually help.
And so we have no ability really to vote no, thinking of the cost it is to homeowners, because you're saying it's an Eagle requirement and you have already made, the city of Mount Pleasant already made an agreement or a policy that they were going to follow. Eagle approved it, sent it back. That's why we're hiring you. So I just want to make sure, if it's a regular spigot of, outside faucet, if it needs some attachment to that, you're going to afford 2 per home.
Yes.
And if there was 3 that was needed, then that would reside with a cost to the homeowner.
Yes.
And then if it was an irrigation system and they needed that fancy piece of equipment that's $60, that has to be put in by a contractor.
Yes. Or a homeowner. I mean, homeowners can pull permits and do work themselves. It would have to be.
It would be a permit, the cost of the materials, and a contractor if you knew nothing about that sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's quite the expense to homeowners, which would probably rarely happen, an influx of outside water into our water system. What has Eagle thought about helping these homeowners, or anybody for that matter that has to go through this expense? Are they setting any grants or any money aside?
That I don't know. I don't believe so, but I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking for Eagle.
Okay, I just thought with your familiarity, you might have an idea if there was some kind of help, financial help for people who cannot, can't do that.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ronan?
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering, could you estimate the number of communities in Michigan, the number of counties or cities in Michigan that have actually adopted this?
Oh,
do you have the...
Everybody should have.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, we're doing this in Union Township, near you. It's easier for me to speak with our clients than in general. Union Township started this year. Big Rapids started a few years back.
Your sense is it's a general thing. I mean, it's something that's just.
Yes.
As Commissioner Gillis said, unfortunately, this is one of those things that is required by the state. It's really not an option for a city not to do it. It's a requirement to do it for our licensing of our municipal water supply. So it's just a matter of what stage the cities are in getting it adopted, probably.
Yeah, and I will say, realistically, the rule has been on the books since the mid 70s, and Eagle has not enforced it. And really what happened was in 2018, they updated the rule, reinforced the language. And so it's really been in the last 2 to 3 years. And what they're doing is, when they come out for their 3-year review of the water system, that's when it's coming up. So they're writing a deficiency or a recommendation that you have to do this, and then the cities are responding as they work their way through all the communities.
Commissioner Toles.
One more quick comment. I understand that to meet any new plumbing and mechanical code on commercial buildings, you have to have backflow preventers. Okay, that's under the commercial. Now we're sort of incorporating the residential that it's already grandfathered in. So how do you make somebody, and anybody putting a new irrigation system is going to have to they always put backflow preventer valves in. But now you're talking about putting vacuum breakers on every outdoor faucet. I mean, I don't know how you're going to enforce that. I mean, just because the DEQ tells you got to do it. I mean, you got people prior to the 70s that already have these older houses that don't have it. So, how are you making them do it? That's what I don't understand.
Our city attorney, Mike Homier, is on the line. Maybe he can address that because he might have dealt with this in some of his other communities.
Thank you.
Well, we certainly have dealt with the cross-connection programs and made the amendments, but I think it's too soon to talk about how that enforcement's going to roll out. I agree that, it's unclear about how it will be enforced if somebody simply refuses. So we'll have to take that as it comes. I haven't had anybody refuse yet in terms of a cross-connection problem, even under the prior rules.
But Mike, the proposed ordinance says that if they refuse to make the repairs, we could disconnect water service if we're concerned enough about it, correct?
Yeah, and I think that's always an option to protect the public water supply. You could take those actions. I suspect that ultimately that would wind its way into court some way, somehow. But, typically, depending on what the remedy is, most people that I've been involved with where we found a cross-connection problem have voluntarily complied. They weren't certainly aware of the cross-contamination problem. I've never had to litigate one of these cases, I will tell you that.
Well, I would like to thank Mr. Patterson, Mr. DeFider, and Director Moore for being willing to answer questions from the commission and also our attorney, Mike Homier. But at this time, I think we should probably be appropriate for the commission to make a motion on the ordinance, and then we can discuss the merits there. Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I move to amend sections 52.12 and 52.29 of the city code regarding cross connections as presented.
And Commissioner Elsager.
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend the sections 52.12 and 52.29 regarding cross connections. That was drafted. Any further discussion from the commission or questions? Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I might ask if staff could look into grants that may be available for people below a certain threshold or income that may have older homes or bought an irrigation system from, on a house that was put in the 70s. And if it isn't a grant, maybe a low interest or no interest loan in case they were to need that. If it was maybe under $100 or $200, someone could afford that. I'm not sure. Whenever you get into a project, and we'll say a home improvement project, it always costs much more than what you had previously estimated. So being that this is in no fault, a homeowner's fault for having these codes changed, I don't know how they wouldn't have already grandfathered things in, just like when our building codes changed or other codes changed, your home is already grandfathered in. You do not have to make updates unless you're turning into a rental. So, but yeah, if we could just have something that might be beneficial to people that can't afford that within a certain income bracket.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Commissioner Gillis, we did some initial looking into that based on your question 2 weeks ago and did not readily find anything, but we will certainly keep our eyes open to see if there's some additional options out there. And I think really the difference with this one, quite frankly, is the concern about the municipal water supply. And if the repairs aren't done, the impact that could have to the larger community. So I think that's why these are handled a bit differently, but we will certainly keep our eyes open about other opportunities for that.
I appreciate that. Even if it's under the safety, the safety of our community members, there might be something out there, but thank you.
Commissioner Toles?
Yes, I don't think I'll be supporting this because number one, you have mechanical and plumbing permits that require backflow preventing valves that are put on water systems, commercial water systems, and put on irrigation systems. And you can't tell me when your outside faucet shut off, that water's got 15 PSI or more on it, that stuff is going to come in my hose and contaminate the water city system. There's just no possible way that's going to happen. This is ridiculous. And again, I find it hard how you're going to enforce these people that are already grandfathered in, that already passed all their inspections, plumbing inspections and mechanical inspections and everything else. Now you want to change the whole system and you're going to make these people do it and then pay yearly inspections to come back and inspect this. I know what happens on the commercial stuff. They put a backflow preventive system on their dishwasher or in a commercial building or any other water system. And then they've got to pay like $100 fee to have somebody come back in and inspect it. And it's a joke. They're there for 2 minutes and charge you $100. Now you're going to start doing this to residential people. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'd rather wait and see what's going to happen when this all settles out. If there's going to be any suits on this matter, because I guarantee you somebody's going to do it.
I guess to that point, it seems like to me, unless they find an issue that the city is paying for this contract, right? And so homeowners themselves won't be paying inspection fees. Is that correct?
Well, once they get the backflow preventer on, then they're responsible for they would have to put the backflow preventer on the irrigation system, and then they would be responsible for the regular inspection of that backflow preventer.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's on the underground irrigation systems. On the hose bibs, that vacuum breaker is a rather simple device that isn't testable, and so that's not going to be subject to having to be tested. And we're by the contract, it's up to 4 of those we'll supply for the residential, 6 for commercial.
So if you've got like a sprinkler system, underground sprinkler system, you're gonna have to pay for someone to have inspect that every 5 to 10 years.
Correct.
Jason, do we know what the inspection fee is going to be?
No, it varies from plumber to plumber, so we don't. Maybe Paul's got an idea, but it's probably another thing that varies region to region.
Yeah, I would say anywhere from $50 to $100. Anything over $100, they should probably call someone else. We always recommend, and we don't recommend any companies. I always recommend we provide a list, call several companies and ask for their price. One thing that Eagle did do that is helping drive the cost down is in the past, you had to be a licensed plumber to perform the test, but now they've changed that rule. You have to be a certified tester, which means lawn irrigation companies can do it. Water distribution operators, anybody with a certain amount of experience with some type of piping system can be certified. So that's helping actually drive the cost down because more and more irrigation contractors are including it with their startup or as an adder when they're out there to start up the system. So it's kind of helping in that way.
Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, just one last comment, because I'm always worried about people paying more money to live here. That's one of the huge things, deterrence of moving here outside our city limits. Is there any possibility too that staff may be able to look into one of our staff members doing those inspections for a reduced cost that would be lower than a regular plumber or someone that puts in watering systems, so that we could provide that to our residents, being that we are passing it, or if this passes this evening, that we would try to absorb some of that cost for them for these, at least the inspections. So that would be something else that I think would be favorable that we look into to help the hardships of this new regulation.
We can look into that. There's a couple things that the commission would need to take into consideration, though, because it's through the municipal water supply, which is a self-supporting utility. We typically don't subsidize those services in any way. So the subsidy would probably have to come through the general fund in order to be able to do that. And the fee policy that you have says that when people have an option in something, that they should pay the full cost of it. But secondly, we generally try not to undercut local contractors. We try not to get into that competition with them. And then thirdly, I would indicate that I would be concerned about whether we have appropriate staffing levels to be able to take on that additional service. But we can certainly look at that if the commission's interested in it. But those would be my top 3 concerns off the cuff.
Well, I guess because it's the government who is making them do this, I think it's kind of, it's not competing with our local plumbers. It's us, the government, are making the cost. We're putting the burden of cost on our residents. So I think that's the kind of difference of somebody that might want to do improvements to their home and have to get permits and the such, and contractors, is different than a government entity coming and saying, you have to do this to your home and it's going to cost you this. And that's just too bad, so sad. That makes me feel really uncomfortable. But I appreciate your feedback, and maybe we can do something about that. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up, and so if the commission is comfortable, I think at this time we'll go to a roll call vote on the motion to amend sections 52.12 and 52.29 of the city code regarding the cross connections. So,
Okay, Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
No.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
yes.
That passes 6-1.
All right, so that has been passed. Next on our agenda is we have a couple bids and quotations, the first of which is item 11A, which is the 5-year cross connection inspection program, which is with HydroCorp, which Paul Patterson is from tonight. Manager Ridley, did you want to?
I think you've talked a lot about it already, but I would just mention that the bid price came in at about $58,000 per year, and it would be a 5-year contract. HydroCorp has been doing the inspections for commercial and industrial for us for the last years. And as was mentioned, they're also the contractor for Union Township, so there would be consistency throughout our entire community. And we have adequate funds budgeted in the water fund to cover this contract for this year. So we recommend you award the contract to HydroCorp as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Manager Ridley. Commissioner Alsager.
Move to approve a 5-year contract with HydroCorp for the cross connection inspection program as presented.
Okay, and Commissioner Ronan.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve that 5-year connection inspection program budget amendment. So I guess that's not a budget amendment. It's just a bid.
Just a bit.
Yep, just a bid. Commissioner Ronan. Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner Gillis.
So we're paying $289,000 over the next 5 years for this company to go and do inspections. They're going to be giving each homeowner, if need be, up to 4 of the devices on their outside spigots or hose connectors. Now, my question is, 5 years, is that going to be all of Mount Pleasant being inspected residential? Or do we have to do this bid every 5 years? We have to dole out another $289,000 to cover the city of Mount Pleasant?
This bid covers both commercial, industrial, and residential. The residential, once we get through the 5 years, won't have to be done for another 10 years after that. But the commercial ones require ongoing inspections.
Is that on a yearly basis?
I believe so. Jason, have we been doing commercial and industrial yearly?
I'm not sure. I think it has to do with the level of hazard.
Yeah, some of them are done annually. The high risk ones are done annually every year by HydroCorp, and then the medium or the other ones, however their tiered system works, are done every 3 years, and then they rotate through that. The residential, we would cover the entire city in the first 5 years, is my understanding. And then after that, we would start, instead of doing 20% of the town, you would start over and start doing 10% of the town every year. So you have a revolving every 10 years, you'd be compliant. We would stay in compliance, is my understanding. I don't think that we would wait another 10 years and then do it again. I think after we get the initial, once we get in compliance with the state of Michigan, then we can start an annual program where we do a tenth of the city each year.
But we would have an option though, right, Jason? At the end of 5 years, we have that option to decide that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tullis.
This almost seems like it's a double dip system, really. If you have a restaurant and you have backflow preventers that are required by the health department comes in and makes sure that you have an independent licensed plumber come in and inspect those once a year. So now we're having that done, and now we're having this independent person do the same thing. It just doesn't make sense to me. So it's a double dip.
They're not being tested. Sorry. They're not being tested twice. They're just being tested the one time. So if the health department's making them do it, then that's great. They don't have to have that expense of doing the test. They can just turn those test results in to us or HydroCorp, and then they'll be covered.
But Jason, you don't understand my point. My point is, why are you doing the work? The health department order requires it from the state of Michigan that's got to be tested, because they made you put it in on all the sinks and all the water systems. And it's got to be tested. The health department do annual inspections every year. So you got to pay a licensed plumber $100 an hour, $125 an hour, whatever it is, to walk in there 2 minutes and look at that and inspect that and turn in a report so you can turn it into the health department. Now you got HydroCorp doing the same thing on the industrial restaurants. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well,
we're paying for double the service.
Well, that's the thing, that HydroCorp's not going to be testing any devices. So they are inspecting the site to make sure that no new devices have showed up or anything like that. Nobody's changed any plumbing that we didn't know about. But they're not going to test the devices. That's the responsibility of the device owner.
I believe HydroCorp is inspecting for compliance. Is that correct, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. They're inspecting for compliance per the state. And then they also assemble those records and put that all together for the state of Michigan, for the municipality. And for when someone is out of compliance or needs testing, then they would get that data from the tester and then pass that along. But I don't believe they'd be testing the devices twice.
No, they won't.
Well, why would you have somebody come in to test and see if you're in compliance when the health department wants that done every year to show you are in compliance, or they yank your food service license? I mean, this just doesn't make any sense, people. I mean, where's the research done here? We're repetitive, and we're paying somebody else to go and inspect and see if somebody else is in compliance. That's the health department of the state of Michigan's job. That's not our job to send somebody to check it. This just does not make sense to me. Doesn't make common sense, seriously.
I think it boils down to what Eagle is saying is, as a municipal water supplier, we have a responsibility to inspect throughout our city to make sure that all of the entities that are hooked up to our municipal water supply are in compliance. And so depending on whether it's a 1 year, it's a 3 year, or with a residential 10-year, we have an obligation to Eagle to do that inspection to make sure everybody's in compliance. The testing itself is, as you said, the health department requirement to make sure it works. We don't look to make sure it works. We make sure that the information or the data is there to show that they're in compliance, but we don't test to make sure it works.
I have a point of information. So if someone, let's say we find them, they're in compliance, and there's some record that this plumbing was done, let's say 4 years ago. So they have now like 6 years to get that test to show that it's been tested within that 10-year time frame. Is that what?
I don't understand your question, Mayor.
I guess what I'm saying is so if let's say you've got, an irrigation, like an underground irrigation system, and it was done 4 years ago. And so obviously it was and HydroCorp comes around and they say, okay, this looks like it's in compliance. That's what we expected. But then the homeowner is responsible for having that tested every 10 years or within a 10-year period. And so if something was done 4 years ago, they've got now like within the next 6 years to get that tested.
I guess there's a window there. Like if a device needs to be tested every X number of years and you're within that window, then HydroCorp would allow that. That would be I believe in the past, like they go that's compliant. It becomes out of compliance when it's been longer than whatever X is. So that homeowner wouldn't be responsible to do anything until the point that it ran out of its certification. So,
Is there a point where like, the Eagle recognizes like, oh, hey, like homeowner, you got this tested, a few years ago, but now it's time for you to get this tested again? Or is that now part of this new regulation?
That frequency for the testing is going to be, it's going to be different. It is between communities. The longest amount of time you're allowed to go is 5 years between a test. So once every 5 years, there has to be a record that assembly was tested. And that 5-year period only applies to lawn irrigation. So there's other backflow preventers in businesses and other places that doesn't apply to. It's actually more frequent. But when they did update this rule, there's a lot of back and forth. I was in a lot of the stakeholder meetings at the time, and residential lawn irrigation landed on that 5 year. rather than the 1 or 3 year like commercial is required.
Thank you. Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, one last comment from me. This comes down to where government ends up using duplication of services to create job security for industries like hydrocore. This is just job security and duplication of services that an agency, in my opinion, that an agency has determined now that these connectors have to be checked every 5 years, every 10 years. And I think that's kind of unfortunate, misuse of money.
Commissioner Tolis?
I want to make one more quick point. That's why restaurants have their inspection on backflow preventers every year, once a year, and they're put on the dishwasher, any open sink that's there, every piece of equipment in there that flows water in and out has a backflow preventer. So, and that's inspected by the health department. So now I guess the DEQ overrules the state health department. I mean, this is ridiculous. And I have to agree with Commissioner Gillis. It's the same thing with those inspections on those valves, inspections on Ansel systems. They get a certified person to come in for $200. You sign the tag and take a look at it and go, "Wow, yeah, you're good for another year." That's $200. I mean, this is just a basic racket. I mean, it doesn't have to be inspected by this other party. It's already inspected by the health department and controlled by the health department, not controlled by DEQ. End of point. That's it. I'm done. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, okay. I think for us though, I mean, this is a regulation that we have to be in compliance with, and so it doesn't look like we have any other hands up, and so at this point, we should go into our vote.
Okay, Commissioner Gillis,
No.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
No.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
That passes 5-2.
Okay. All right. Well, I would like to thank again everyone, Director Moore, Mr. DeFider, and Mr. Patterson for their time in answering our questions. It's certainly it is it's not something we come across every day, and so I appreciate their expertise. Next, we have our second bid, 11B, which is the storm sewer extension. And I will hand this over to Manager Ridley for overview.
As you may recall, a project that was approved in the capital improvement plan and part of the operating budget includes the installation of storm sewer pipes in certain areas of the city where they don't currently exist. And the primary reason for this recommendation is that as properties become compliant by disconnecting sump pumps from our sanitary sewer system in some areas of the city, there's no storm sewer for them to put the flow into. So the flow ends up going into their own yard, and or it goes into the street and then goes through the storm system in the street system. And that can cause some icing issues and some degradation of the street if it's iced up and backed up. So our recommendation was in some of those areas where we knew that was happening to start installing storm sewer pipes under the ground. And we recommended starting with Briarwood, Linwood, and York. The bids that we received when we sent it out, because we had never done this kind of project before, were higher than what we had originally estimated. But as we've reviewed the bids that were received, they appear very reasonable for the amount of work that's being done. So we provided you two options since it came in over budget. One option is to award the bid as presented and approve the appropriate budget amendment for the work. Or the second is to reduce the scope of the work and only complete one street this year And that way we could move the other streets to future years, and it would just take us longer to get the entire project done. Of the two options, we're recommending we go ahead and award the bid of $98,990 to Isabella Corp. To do all three streets as planned, because they eventually all have to be done. And there is some savings for mobilization since they're all in the same area. So we're recommending the approval of that bid and the appropriate budget amendment from the local street fund to cover that extra.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Commissioner Elsager.
I move to approve the contract for the 2021 Storm Sewer Extension Project with the Isabella Corporation for $98,990 and the appropriate budget amendment.
Okay. And Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I will second that.
Okay. And so just to reiterate, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract with Isabella Corp. And the budget amendment for $41,990, which in our packet was option 1 and the recommended option from staff. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I would just like to say that I think this project is really important. I think it's going to help, especially when we face future potential flooding events, and so that is going to save potentially damages to some of our homeowners. Chris, I think we can vote.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Next on our agenda is item number 13, which is to consider a resolution extending temporary permitting of outdoor business activities. Manager Ridley, would you like to give a brief overview?
Sure. As you will recall, throughout 2020, you approved various resolutions to help expedite the process for outdoor permitting, to allow business activities and the waiver of the fees related to that outdoor permitting. And this was all based on the premise of assisting local businesses as they were working to be in compliance with either required or hopefully what might eventually become desired, but we're not there yet, social distancing requirements, and also to provide additional safety for the community. The communication that you received in your packet indicates that over last year, 16 businesses utilized the opportunity for those outdoor business activities. And that resolution, the latest one that you approved, expires on March 15th. Because of where we still are in the pandemic and because of the restrictions that businesses still have, and to keep our community safe, we're recommending that you once again extend the resolution through November 15th of this year, and the updated resolution has been provided in your packet that would accomplish that.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. I would entertain a motion to consider extending the temporary permitting of outdoor business activities. Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I move to approve the resolution extending the temporary permitting of outdoor business activities to November 15th, 2021 as presented.
And Commissioner Elsager.
I will second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any discussion? Okay. I just know that this was really important for some of our downtown businesses, and I think it, I think it was a necessary thing last year because of the pandemic, but I do think that continuing this year is going to be equally important, and I think potentially post-pandemic, this might be, something that our community really enjoys and add some vibrancy to our downtown.
And Mayor, I would just add to that, that it applies to more than just downtown too. Some of the other businesses that did take advantage of it are not in the downtown. They were able to use their own property, but it expanded their ability outside over what they would typically have. So it's helpful throughout the whole community.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. All right, I think we can vote, Chris.
Okay, Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Okay. Next is item number 14, which is to consider authorization for purchase of easements for approach slope clearing project. I could introduce it, but Manager Ridley, I'll hand it to you.
Okay. As you know, we've been working on the FAA required approach clearing near the airport for a couple of years now. And the next step in the process is to obtain the navigation easements for 3 parcels that are near the airport, so that those parcels can be accessed to remove the protrusions and make sure that they stay removed. Mead and Hunt has completed all of the research and has successfully negotiated the purchase of the 3 easements as outlined in your memo. And the combined price for all 3 of the easements is as Mead and Hunt first thought they would be, and totals $48,650 across all 3 properties. And I would remind you that 95% of that cost is covered by federal and state funds. Both our airport manager, Bill Brickner, and our consultant, Stephanie Ward, are available on the call if you have any detailed questions for them. But we recommend you authorize the mayor to sign the appropriate paperwork for the purchase of those easements.
Commissioner Tolis.
Move to approve the purchase of the easements for parcels E19, E20, and E21 for a combination amount of $48,650, and authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the closing documents.
And Commissioner Elsager.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to purchase those easements. I think that this is an important project, as everybody here knows, to help keep our airport safe and obviously is an economic engine for our local community. So I don't see any hands up for discussion, and so I think we can vote.
Sorry, everybody. Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Okay. Next on the agenda is consider amended contract for the water reliability study. And I'll ask Manager Ridley to introduce the topic.
Yes, we are required to complete this water reliability study every 5 years. And last year we took quotes from engineering firms to complete the analysis for us. And we contracted with C2AE Engineering to complete the study. And the last part of the study requires the modeling of our distribution system. And at that point, it was determined that more work was needed than was anticipated so that our distribution network could be loaded into the modeling software. And this extra work would have been needed regardless of which engineering firm would have done the work. And so in order to complete the study, we're recommending you authorize an amendment of $9,320 for the additional work, since this amendment would take the total cost over the $20,000 purchasing threshold that staff has authority to do.
Commissioner Elsager.
I move to approve the budget amendments for 2020 projects as presented.
Oh, I think you might be one ahead of us.
Oh, whoops.
We're talking about the water contract the contract for the water reliability study.
Let's see, I'm 2 pages too far. I was flipping through to get to them. Let's try that. Let's try that again. Move to approve the contract amendment with C2AE for $9,390 for the completion of the water reliability study.
Okay. And Commissioner or Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract amendment with C2AE. Any discussion? Okay. I think we can vote, Chris.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Next on our agenda is item number 17, which is to consider budget amendments for the projects carry forward from 2020. Manager Ridley.
So for your last action item tonight, as we closed out 2020, we had a much higher number of purchases or projects that were not completed as of December 31st than what we would typically see due to the pandemic. So in order to complete those projects or the purchases as soon as we can this year, we're recommending that the appropriate budget amendments be done now to reallocate the funds to the existing projects. And approval of the projects listed in your memo would complete 10 projects or purchases that were planned for last year and were appropriately budgeted for last year, and in many cases were started. There's only one project that the amount being requested is higher than what was originally approved, and that project is for the repair and painting of the pedestrian bridge on M20, as that requires additional tenting more than what we anticipated to protect the river. So that cost increased from $15,000 to $22,000. And we have not started that project yet because of the cost increase. We haven't done anything with that until you were aware of that cost increase. But all of the others are within the original budgeted amount that was approved for last year. So we recommend that you approve the 10 budget amendments as presented in the memo.
Commissioner Tolis.
I'll move to approve the budget amendments, 10 of them, to be carried forward from 2020.
And Commissioner Elsager.
I second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve those budget amendments from those projects. Any discussion? Okay. I think what's particularly nice about this is that those except with the exclusion of the one, that the prices are the same for these projects. And so that makes it much easier to carry forward. With that, I think we can vote.
Okay. Commissioner Simon,
Yes.
Commissioner Elsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Okay. Next, we have announcements on city-related issues and new business. Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, like the first speaker, Mr. Hall, this evening, I would like everyone to know that the website that you can go to, Central Michigan District Health Department, it's an acronym, cmdhd.org, O-R-G. That is their homepage, and it has on that a link to sign up for your COVID vaccines. As you heard Mr. Hall explain, anyone 50 or older, we're now moving into that stage. that you don't have to have underlying medical conditions. So anyone within the community that are 50 and older, or anyone that are teachers or are medical care workers, or any of the other previous phases that we've already moved through, can still sign up. As of today, when I looked on that website, there are now 3 locations available at Finch Field House, Soaring Eagle Casino, and there was one more. Oh, the Central Michigan District Health Department on Isabella Road. So several different dates, multiple times, every 15 minutes. So it gives you a wide variety to choose from. So please do your part and try to, if you're in that category, get in and get vaccinated. The larger the percentage of the population here that are vaccinated is the further we move into going back to normal life. And I want to commend the community members of still being diligent on mask wearing, social distancing, hand washing, and taking care of each other and community help. So I appreciate that and thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Gillis. Anyone else this evening? Okay. I would just like to, again, reiterate that in our community, there is great need for basic necessities like food, clothing, and shelter. And so there are several agencies like ICRH, Clothing Inc., the food pantry that could use donations and volunteer hours if you are willing and able. So I encourage people to help out. And as always, and as Commissioner Gillis pointed out, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And so if you can, get your vaccine and keep your masks up. So at this point, without any other hands up, I think I'll open up public comment for anything agenda or non-agenda items. If you're with us by Zoom, you can hit the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or you can hit *9 on your telephone. Manager Ridley, did we have any emailed comments to the commission?
No, sir, none have come in.
All right, and I don't see any hands up in the attendees, and so at this time I will close the public comment on agenda and non-agenda items, and we'll take a recess for about 5 minutes. We're going to reconvene for a work session on reviewing the class report done on owner-occupied incentive program. So thanks, everybody. I feel bad mentioning this, but one of the benefits of being at home is I can go to the freezer and get a spoonful of ice cream between.
I don't even want to hear that. Well, you just rubbed it in.
I did, yeah.
Pete, I want to show you how to stop your video.
How do I do that?
Okay, pick up your mouse.
Okay,
Okay, and go over to the bottom left of your screen. And you see how it pops up a microphone that says mute when your mouse hovers over the bottom left?
to the left?
To the left. Right above your taskbar at the bottom where the Windows icon is, the little window with 4 boxes, white boxes. Move your mouse above in the black and it shows a mute and a stop video. Left bottom.
Okay, it says type here to search all the way to the left. And
No,
then
you're too far. You want to go up a little. Move your mouse into the black area of the screen.
okay, I see now. It says stop video and mute. Okay.
Right. And that's how you can mute yourself and turn yourself back on to talk.
Okay.
And then if I hit stop video, my name just comes on. But if I hit start video, because as soon as you hit stop video, it toggles to start video.
Got it.
And then I click on start video. Another thing for all of you, you don't have to go to a mute button anywhere on your screen. You can just hold down your space bar to unmute you. So if you have yourself muted to just respond as a yes or a no, you can just hold down your space bar. So that's the lessons for this evening.
Thank you. Yeah, my raise hand function isn't working, so it didn't come up on there.
Okay. I did that in another life, just saying. I used to teach computer classes. So.
Thanks, Lori. Well, we have everybody here with us, and Mr. Kane, city planner, is also with us. And so, as everybody knows here, we had a class project with the direction of Dr. Colarelli from the CMU Psychology Department, do interviews and surveys from our either rental owners or homeowners, with a focus of trying to get some information on an owner-occupied incentive program. But at this point, we've got 2 questions tonight. Is one, what things are we more interested in finding more information about? And are we willing to wait till the fall to have the class further, work with us? And so at this point, I'd like to sort of hand it over to staff, either Manager Ridley or Mr. Kane, just to give an overview and their insight.
I guess I would just make 2 comments, Mayor. First of all, there's a lot of data in this report. The class did a tremendous amount of work, and so there's a lot of data here. And so what we've asked you to do tonight based on the amount of time you have, is to really try to focus on the incentive portion of it, to see what the respondents said about their willingness to, or what it would take in order for them to sell their properties into an owner-occupied program. And we think if we first focus on that and get a feel for what types of things you're interested in, we can more readily focus the future conversations about being able to put together that incentive program for you. But as I said, there's a lot of other data there too that we may want to come back to at another time. And then the second piece that I would indicate is I notice in our attendee list that Dr. Colarelli obviously was very interested in your discussion, and he has joined us this evening. So I'm sure if you have any questions about the work that the students did, My guess is he would be happy to join your group if you want him to, and be able to address some of the questions that you may have as you get into the discussion. But with those two things, I'll ask Jacob if he has anything else to add before you start your discussion.
Thanks, Nancy. I would just echo what you said in terms of the effort that the students put into this project. It was extremely impressive. Within a very tight time frame, they were able to produce a plan to gather input from two very large populations within our community, and then take that feedback and produce the report that's before you tonight. So I just want to extend my appreciation to Dr. Colarelli and the students, who are all an absolute pleasure to work with.
Okay, thank you. I guess, I'll start out kind of giving, as Manager Ridley sort of pointed out, there's a lot of different data here. And I found a lot of it to be very interesting, especially the term studentification of sort of the housing market and how that's a trend in college towns. And that sort of literature review that was sort of towards the end of the report and also highlighted in the beginning, I thought really opened up a lot of areas for that's something I'm really interested in. But even though that might not directly pertain to our discussion tonight, but to me, it seemed like the one thing that really stuck out that pertains to a homeowner incentive program is really the financial incentive that we would be either willing and able to provide for someone to, sell their home to become an owner occupied, house instead of a rental. And that kind of boils down, I think, in some ways, the conversation. There were a lot of things in there that I thought were very interesting, especially how that studentification affects the local working class housing market. And I sort of think that speaks a lot to actually our middle housing conversation about providing not shared spaces, but spaces where someone can rent or own something that they have their own common space, and how that affects mental health, and also the different, according to the map, different complaints versus property repairs or domestic/legal issues. And I don't want to go into the big details because I think they're very interesting things that we learned, but maybe not directly concerning the potential program. And so for me, I'd be more interested in what kind of incentive would tip the scales for someone who owns a detached house, and what they would be willing to say, okay, that makes sense for me financially to convert that into a non-rental and sell that to someone who'd like to use that as their primary residence. And I would be willing to wait till the fall to sort of have that input from the staff or from the students rather. But I see Commissioner Alsager has her hand up, and so turn it over to her.
Well, I do echo some of the things that you just said, Mayor Joseph. Waiting until fall, I think, is sensible. One thing I'm paying attention to is that less than a third of the owners that typically rent to students mentioned that they would be willing to sell. And one thing I think we might need to tie to that is what are our realtors saying? Are they seeing as a need? And that's, a different area that we haven't gone into with this report. So that's where my thoughts are.
Yeah. Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I just, I may have missed it in here, but Was this survey anonymous, or can we go back and target those individuals who indicated they'd be interested, 26% or whatever, that indicated they'd be interested in selling? Or do we need to sort of redo the, do you know offhand?
It was anonymous.
It was anonymous. That's what I figured. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good to get responses, but bad if you want to target them specifically. I got it. Right. Okay.
And one of the things Dr. Colorelli said, or what I heard him say, I think I heard him say, is that in general, because of the response rate, he thinks these responses are fairly representative across the city. If you look at the general rates, if you dig down into the by region, it becomes less reliable. But what he was talking about is if we do get groups together, that we do a general invite again to try to get across the city and start out with saying, this is what the survey said. Does this make sense to you? Do you agree with this? And then get into the more debate about it. So he saw it as a way to confirm what the survey responses were, maybe with a different group of people, and then be able to get more into the details of it.
Commissioner Alsager?
Well, and then I think the conversation needs to continue with what are we going to be seeing from CMU? Obviously, there's empty apartments, but not every student wants to be in an apartment. Some like to be in houses. So it really is going to depend on enrollment quite a bit.
Yeah. Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I saw Dr. Colorelli's recommendation that way about how to proceed further. I guess I'd probably argue at some point if we could focus it more, right? Because we could go back and validate this survey and then validate another survey. You know, we could. At what point does the validation of the responses end? It's a reasonable sample. I wonder if we can't specifically target. I like the focus group idea. Don't get me wrong. But I wonder if we can't specifically target it for people who are just willing to, you know, the 26% or whatever percentage that are willing to consider selling their properties. It's clear another 26% are saying, hey, it's a financial investment for me. There's no way I'm going to sell. I'm making money. I'm doing well. So I don't know that I want to sample them again and say, hey, come to another meeting. But maybe I'm missing something.
So Commissioner Ronan, just to make sure I understand what you're saying, are you suggesting that we would, when we do the invites to the small group discussions, that we indicate that we're more interested in talking to property owners who have an interest or willingness to sell?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, this started out several years ago at some of our goal setting meetings, and because of the high percentages of rentals versus homeowners and trying to have more of a ratio in neighborhoods. There are some neighborhoods that obviously don't have a high percent of rentals, and other neighborhoods, you know, that do. And you know those just by the map and the responses of the surveys. I think the blight ordinance is going to help a lot of the people that the responses in the surveys where they had trouble with their neighbors or litter. I think after we get that going, as spring brings the thawing and code enforcement can get out, that might help that situation. But before we had an incentive program in a manner of converting rentals into homeowners, or if someone wanted to purchase it, and we would contribute 10% of the purchase price of the home up to $10,000. And I think there was about a handful of homes that were converted from rentals to homeowner occupied. There were some loopholes where people took advantage of it, where we had to put in a time slot that you had to keep it as a homeowner occupied for 5 years. So people wouldn't just flip it and for a year be homeowner occupied and then turn back to a rental, even though there were people that took that route, and then we had to do law enforcement and code enforcement because they had violated the stipulation of the city contributing to the purchase price of the house, because people were finding loopholes, taking their house, turning it into a rental for 6 months and then selling it to their daughter. So they got $10,000 towards the purchase of their family home. Loopholes that people took or found a way to take advantage of. So I do believe there are ways to frame that so there would be less ability to take advantage of that. But I think incentives, not so much monetary incentives to the landlord, but monetary incentives to the homeowner, which actually goes to the landlord that's selling it, might be one way to try to do some conversions. We're not going to get a lot of conversions. If we get one a year, we'll be lucky, but it's a way, it's in the right direction. You know, maybe it'll be, and we can't forget that enrollment may never come back. People, now that they've had a taste of online learning, may search out schools that offer that. They may never come back into the community. So sooner or later, supply and demand is going to hit these landlords because they're not going to be renting their properties. So they're going to have to lower the rent each month to a point where they may not be making the profits they have made in the past or clearly in the last couple of years. But to avoid that kind of a crunch, I would hope that they would look at the possibility of changing some of those rentals or downsizing, because we might not have those students ever come back. I would much rather see housing units occupied versus vacant. And like any economics class will tell you, supply and demand will eventually make that rental rate decrease. So another option that we had talked about several years ago was trying to give an incentive with Central about taking these houses and turning them into graduate people that were graduate students that may have a family, or even now with our medical school, because at that time we were discussing that our medical school wasn't up and running, where then these conversions could happen still close to campus, but taking a rental, redesigning it or redoing it for a family home, and then letting graduate families or medical students that are living here decide to hopefully buy and become part of our community. Of course, that would be some kind of a buy-in with Central, maybe even some finances may come that way. But I do believe this is a worthy project and a worthy agenda to try to move forward, not only to get a better ratio, but also to help our neighborhoods. In a neighborhood with high rentals where I live, homeowners tend to take a little more community pride or long time improvements, I guess, to their properties versus rentals. People that are in and out of the neighborhood, and we have a lot of them here. So some neighborhoods, maybe not where you live, in your neighborhood, in the city, but in other places, we are surrounded by rentals. And so some of those opportunities with those lower cost homes would be perfect for the first time homeowner and families that are trying to have some equity in the community. So that's my take on it, and some history about some of the conversations in the past. So thank you.
Commissioner Toles?
I have to agree with Commissioner Gillis's comments. I've talked to a few realtors, and I think the 26% that you see that's in the CMU survey of owner occupied student rentals that would be willing to sell, I think a majority of those are student rentals that are unoccupied right now, I believe. And I think the big unknown factor is the future of CMU's enrollment. I agree with Commissioner Gillis on the supply and demand. You know, a lot of these aren't going to be able to be rented in the future. And also a lot of these student rentals, a lot of these people have paid quite a lot of money for them, and to turn them into a single home, I mean, that's going to be hard to do because of the amount of money that they've got that they paid per head to get into these units. But again, the demand for it is going to drive it. You know, some of these are just not going to be rented again. That's my feeling.
Were there specific items that are other items that the commission would like more information on in terms of shaping the incentive program? Commissioner Gillis?
Commissioner Gillis, you're muted.
Thank you. Just correct me if I'm wrong. A house that is vacant is still taxed at the same rate as a house that is has students in it. Is that correct?
It is because the value of the house is always determined on December 31st. And so that value doesn't change at all during that following year. Now, in a rental situation, if it's vacant for an entire year, and there's a number of those that are starting to affect the market rates, then the assessed values can change, or an individual property owner can appeal to the Board of Review to say, based on my experience, I think my value should change. But it would take an appeal, and then it wouldn't go into effect until the prior year, or the following year, I'm sorry.
Okay, so essentially, if it were to continue, there might be a loss or decrease to the tax base because people could claim that that value isn't there because of the depressed housing market here, and it's not worth as much.
Eventually that could happen, but that would be determined by the assessor and or the Board of Review if a property owner appealed.
Okay. All right, and an off question, is that the same with DACO too? So that DACO, it would still be taxed at the same rate even if the building was empty?
Yes.
Okay.
All properties are handled the same.
Okay, yeah.
Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I was interested in numbers today, so I looked up. I think it's hard to know how many students are at CMU, right? It's not an easy question to answer, right? You have both the global campus and the on-campus campus. And you have, so one of the numbers you could look at is just how many students actually took a course during this academic year. And all they had to take is one credit, right? So that's not necessarily full-time students, but that number looks to be about 13,972. And the expectation is that it's probably not going up next year. So I think in terms of look, I'm not speaking for the university. I teach there, but I'm just talking about, I'm just sharing as a commissioner, right? The university can speak for themselves, and I'm not pretending that. But I don't think those numbers are going back up. It's interesting, though, if you look at the survey, and I may be making this up, I was just looking and I couldn't find out where I read it, and I read it a while ago, but about 73% of the people renting, the landlords said that they're worried about the students at CMU, and about 5% said they can't rent. So, I mean, there's, the numbers, somehow it hasn't caught up yet or something, or there's some discrepancy in terms of that. But it's an interesting time. Right.
Commissioner Ronan, you bring up a good point. I had a conversation today with some of the CMU administrators about getting a better idea of what the target number for the Mount Pleasant campus really is in the coming years, because we hear numbers from a number of people about what that number might be next year. And so they're looking into providing us with some information about what they're projecting for the Mount Pleasant numbers for next year to see what kind of bookends they can give us as far as what they think is realistic. So we will have an official CMU response at some point.
Yeah, terrific. I can share, well, okay. We have graphs where we've looked at what's expected in the Midwest. There's just all sorts of data out there that at some point, but the issue is it's not positive, right? Regardless of what they're going to suggest. I mean, thinking that CMU is going to go back up is just not, it's not happening.
Commissioner Toles?
Like the last time we had President Davies on and I asked him a question, he told me that on campus students were around 11,400 for the last semester. So I don't know how close that is, but definitely there's going to have to be some work done to get students coming back here. And like I said, I mentioned I talked to a couple of realtors, and right now the market on student housing, they can't even give student housing away right now. I mean, there's just no market for it.
As far as selling it, Commissioner Toles, is that what you're talking about?
Correct, Manager Redley. Trying to sell it right now is almost impossible because there's no market for it right now that anybody's looking for student housing. And the enrollment's got a lot to do with that, just the unknowns there,
Commissioner Elsager.
I seem to remember not too long ago, we had a property that we were changing its zoning, and it was a CMU dad who was purchasing a church to turn it back into a house, but it was so his first one student and then another student would be using it while they're on campus as CMU students. And that's not really, that's maybe considered in that central district.
That was on Fancher Street, I believe.
Yeah.
George? No. Okay.
Yeah, and that doesn't really address what we're talking about. That's just, a recent case of a purchase that I was remembering.
Yeah.
So I guess, Mayor, if the commission might be willing, a couple of you mentioned that you would be willing to have Dr. Colorelli's class in the fall do some additional research. But the only thing we've really talked about what that additional research might be is what those financial incentives might look like. So I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile, since Dr. Colorelli is with us, to invite him in to see if that gives enough guidance, if in fact his class is going to help us out in the fall with that, or what other probing questions he may have for you to make that next step more worthwhile.
Yeah.
Is the group okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to see what he has to say.
Yes.
I'm really putting him on the spot because he wasn't expecting this tonight, so I just invited him in. Sorry, Dr. Colorelli.
Okay.
He is.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
See y'all.
You've heard the discussion thus far.
Yes.
And when we've talked about next steps with the small group discussions, would this give your class, assuming you are able to have your class do it, because I know that wasn't a guarantee, would that give enough information for you to work from what you've heard thus far?
My preference would be actually to proceed pretty much the way that we did last time, where I met first. You and I think Jacob and some of the commissioners met over online, and then sort of got the ball rolling and discussed it a little further. Got some more ideas. Then Jacob and I met at least once I remember for an extended period where we talked more. So my point here is that I think there's, rather than say, yes, let's go with that, I think, you know, put that on the table, but I think it would probably be worthwhile to engage in some more discussion with either Manager Ridley or some of the commissioners, and also with Mr. Kane, to explore that a little more and just see where we want to go rather than just decide right now.
Okay. Jacob, I'm sorry, I kind of skipped over you. Do you have thoughts on that as well? I didn't leave you out of that discussion. I apologize.
No, I don't, other than I think we can certainly frame an appropriate discussion for the focus groups that'll get the type of information that will help the commission make a decision on incentives.
Yeah. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I was wondering, given my computer's whatever, given the issue of realtors, I wonder if when you discuss something in the future, if maybe chatting with a realtor or two might. I mean, I don't sell property, you know, I'm not. But I wonder if adding that to the mix might not be a bad. Or do they have like quarterly publications or something? But something like that would also might be useful. I don't know.
I mean, in non-COVID times, I meet with every agency in town every other year at a minimum, just to talk about the market and what's going on at the city, and so we can continue to do that.
Oh, I take it. Okay.
That would be a good way to do it, and hopefully by late summer that'll be practical again for everyone.
I don't know if this is helpful, but one thing it seems like there are different levels of appreciation of, like, you know, the location of where someone's home is. Like, it seemed like in the central neighborhood, there seemed to be high satisfaction with like the location of their home and like friendliness of like their neighbors, versus I think there was somewhat more dissatisfaction in the southeast neighborhood, where location seemed to be sort of, you know, less appreciated. And I wonder if I don't know, and I kind of think that it probably is not neatly fit into an incentive program, but how location can serve the city's purposes and how that, you know, you can, you know, market an incentive program. I know, you know, I remember when the zoning ordinance was passed, there's like concern about, you know, that neighborhood just north of campus, right? And some of those homes are older. They were built for maybe, you know, student rentals that could house, you know, eight students at a time, but now it's zoned single family. And, you know, at some point, if that zoning doesn't change, you know, those houses have become older, and like that single family or maybe even a, you know, middle housing type becomes more practical. And so I don't know if that can play into this incentive program, like those sorts of factors, but I figure it's kind of food for thought. But
I think that's a good point, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say the one thing we do know is where the rentals are, what type of rentals they are, and who owns them. So depending on who participates in the focus group and their level of interest, it'll be easy enough for us to determine where properties with a high likelihood of participating might be located to answer some of those geography questions.
mm-hmm. Commissioner Gillis? Okay.
I think it comes down to incentive of monetary value. I mean, that's what's going to work here. Let's not overthink it. It's usually some help in purchasing the house to be converted back into what a family may be able to use. So, and there might be only a few people that are interested in even working with a buyer that, will be having some help for conversion. So, but I don't think there's going to be that many people out there, from what at least the survey results showed, that are going to be thinking about that 6 months from now, a year from now. I think if we were trying to put something in place that as the years go by and the landlords can't rent their property, there might be more incentive on their part to reasonably think that it's time to let that property go, and hopefully those properties can be picked up and converted. But I think the real incentive will be some type of monetary value. And I think we're kind of overthinking it, to where if we put something in place, the last time we had something like that in place, it did work. It wasn't, you're not going to get 10 properties converting in 1 year, just like we don't have 10 new homes built in 1 year. We have very few new homes built in 1 year. So because there's not that many vacant land left, you'd have to take a house down to build a new one. But so I think just kind of keep pushing it down and getting more surveys is just pushing it down the road. So I think we should maybe be able to try to come up with something with some of the information that we already have, and knowing that money speaks wonders when you're trying to help that conversion. So.
Yeah, Commissioner Gillis, you reminded me of something too, back when we had the other survey, and I don't have the analysis in front of me, but it seemed like even though we only did have a couple each year, what was happening on the back end is we also had owner occupieds that were converting to rentals. So we really weren't making any progress. And so that was part of the frustration as well, is if we're putting money into it, but yet we're not making progress in the ratio, is it worth it? But it was a much different economy at that time than what it is now. So I'm not sure that that back end would necessarily happen, but I think that's something for us to remember and keep in mind as well.
Pete?
Yeah, I have to agree with Commissioner Gillis on most of the comments she made. And I think the most two important things in real estate is location. And you can't even look at those factors now because of the COVID and everything else that's going on. One of the realtors I mentioned is a good friend of mine, and she's one of the top producers in the city of Mount Pleasant in Isabella County in sales. And she basically told me the market is dead. Student rental market is dead, period. You can't even give the stuff. Nobody's looking at anything. So I agree with Commissioner Gillis. You're going to have to get some type of monetary program out there to give incentives, for somebody to sell something and convert it back. But I think it's an uphill battle. I really do, because the market is dead right now, as far as student rentals. And I don't know how we're going to get around that. I mean, and a big factor on that, you see this 26% that are saying they'd sell. Yeah, of course they'd sell, because the majority of those are empty right now. And that's all going to be driven by the market. So I think it's like an uphill battle. It's not a simple solution. And I don't know what it's going to come back. You just have an unknown factor with the CMU enrollment, and a lot of these places are empty right now. So just as Commissioner Gillis said, some of these landlords are only going to be able to keep up for a while, because most of their places are vacant and they're not making the amount of money they're making. So they're not making a return on their investment. They're going to have to do something. They're just going to have to possibly give it up and just walk away from it. So we got a tough situation.
Could I say something? Yeah, I think one of the ideas that we had, speaking to Mr. Tolz's point, was that once you do get the owners together with other stakeholders in the city, that they can brainstorm about ideas about what they might be able to do. In other words, it's hard to know what to do, but I think one way forward is to, get people together and in some sort of structured way and get their ideas out there, and who knows what they might come up with that could move those empty student rentals to some other type of housing that for which there may be a stronger market.
I agree with that, and that's basically what we're trying to do with the local businesses and stuff, get them to come in and join with them and try to brainstorm something, to get around this COVID. And I think that's a great idea. Maybe they can come up with something.
Lori, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want the focus to remain on single family homes and not taking apartment buildings and turning into a different use. I would rather see the neighborhoods that are inundated with rentals start relieving some pressure with more static homeowners versus apartment buildings repurposed. So I don't know if that's what you had in mind, because I know there are apartment buildings that are vacant, a landlord that has 3 buildings and only 2 of them are housing people. The other one stands vacant. Is that what you're considering? Is that what you're thinking about? We're still concentrating our efforts on single family home ownership.
If you're asking me, yes, it's our report was about the single families. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to ask, does the commission feel comfortable with the sort of direction that we're giving to staff right now about, one, items of concern, and then 2, moving forward in the fall with Dr. Corelli's class? So I see Vice Mayor Perschbacher's head nodding.
Yep.
Commissioner Alsager's head nodding. Commissioner Tolis.
I certainly am. Yeah.
Commissioner Simon, Commissioner Ronan. So I will flip that question. Staff, do you feel comfortable with the amount of information that we're giving you?
I'm going to defer to Jacob on this one. How do you feel, Jacob?
Yeah, I think we're on a similar track to where we were headed with the first part of the project, so I'm comfortable moving forward.
Okay.
If I may, just one caveat, as George said, and who knows how many students are going to be enrolling next year. So assuming I have a class next year, I can help you, but I can't guarantee that. But I sure hope so.
Yes, thank you for your reminder. You were very clear about that the last time we spoke. And we won't make you do the work, we promise.
Yep.
And thank you and your students for doing that report. It was very thorough and very interesting read.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a good experience for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George, go ahead.
Now, Steve, are these first-year students or are they students already in the program?
Well, the class that does this work are second-year graduate students.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so I should be okay.
You should be okay.
Yeah.
I have the same fear, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
I would say, in the side note, Dr. Corelli, I mean, some of the effects of studentification were really interesting to me, and the differences in neighborhoods about what complaints were. Like some were, legal domestic issues versus, some centered around students. And really, to me, it opened up looking at socioeconomic status in our city, and and how that's accounting for some of the issues that people are, either complaining about or happy about. And then also, how does the housing market reflect, the struggles of people? I mean, 60% of our community are renters, and, in a housing market that is kind of tight, it's not necessarily cheap to live in Mount Pleasant. And so, very interesting. I don't know if it directly impacts an incentive program, but I thought it was very eye-opening, and I appreciated it.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah.
So based on what we've heard tonight, Jacob and I can have some more conversations on it. We'll have some further conversations with Dr. Colorelli. And if we feel like we need some additional guidance from anybody, we will reach out to let you know. But it sounds like we've got enough to take us with the next step forward to keep moving this one down the road. So I appreciate your input tonight. And Dr. Colorelli, thanks for joining us without any notice that we were going to pull you in to do that. It was very helpful.
Okay, glad to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I think at this point it's 9:44. I think we're safe to adjourn our meeting. And I'd just like to thank everybody for a good evening and a good meeting.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.